Good afternoon. Thanks to everyone for making time to join us for today's webinar, Scheduled Maintenance Chaos Avoidance. The key to effectively scheduling preventive maintenance is coordination throughout the organization. The focus of this webinar will be how to use CMMS-supported preventive and predictive maintenance tasks to provide proactive, anticipated support to manufacturing of facility equipment and assets. You'll learn how to deploy and sustain planned support, including scheduling, job plans, spare parts, and continuous improvement, all in harmony with sales, production, and other key aspects of your organization. The presentation will also include applications for critical equipment and performance metrics, and an integrated method that addresses multiple sites. Our speaker today is Paul LaChance, Senior Manufacturing Advisor for Dude Solutions. He has devoted his entire career to optimizing maintenance teams by enabling data-driven decisions and actionable insights. LaChance wrote his first CMMS system in 2004 and has since spent his professional career designing and directing CMMS and EAM systems. A regular speaker at national trade shows, he has been featured at IMTS, FabTech, and SMRP, along with several industry magazines. As Paul wakes his way through the presentation, you'll likely have questions. You can use the Q&A box on your screen to submit a question at any time during the presentation. We'll also have time at the end of the webinar to address several of your questions. If we don't get to your question during the webinar, those will be passed along to Paul afterwards. We'll also be running a poll at the end of the webinar where you can ask for more information on some of the topics you'll be learning about today. If you'd like to revisit this webinar in the future, you'll be emailed an archived version in the days following the presentation. With that, I'd like to turn things over to Paul for Scheduled Maintenance Chaos Avoidance. Paul?
Thank you, Greg, and thanks everybody for joining me today. Avoiding chaos and how you can deal with scheduling maintenance. We're going to address questions today such as how can I be more proactive, have more preventive maintenance environment? How can I squeeze maintenance in with everything else going on in my organization? And how can I make sure I have the right people, parts, and instructions when I need them? To avoid chaos, you need to move away from firefighting. To avoid chaos will lead you on a path towards greater efficiency and greater profitability. So today the agenda, the goals we're going to talk about, we'll talk about continuous improvement, communication and collaboration, making sure you have a solid plan, how the benefits of an industrial Internet of Things, PM optimization, can benefit you for this, and metrics, analytics to measure and make sure that you're on track. So before we get into the webinar, just a little bit about Dude Solutions. As you can see from the information on the screen here, we're going on our 20th anniversary. As you can see, we've got a lot of clients, a lot of experience, and really understand what it takes to help deliver our clients quality software and services to really optimize their maintenance operations. We've got footprint all around the country, clients all around the country, all around the world that use our technology and our solutions and have for many years. Part of the presentation today, I'll be featuring our Asset Essentials CMMS. It doesn't really matter what CMMS you're using as long as it's a quality CMMS. And in our case, it's got to cover everything from work orders management, predictive, preventive maintenance. Of course, assets are at the center, asset management. The ability to integrate with other applications, really has to have a solid mobile solution. Purchasing and inventory, key elements to this. Reporting and analytics. So Asset Essentials is our tool, and we'll be using that to feature this. But again, it's the principles that we'll be talking about today. So let's start with continuous improvement. A fairly generic phrase, but really critical because to take on these challenges of improving your maintenance operations, to get away from chaos, you do these things in increments and continually until you get to the point where you really are optimized. I love the first slide here, and it's something that you have to get over very early in this process on the journey of continuous improvement. Who wants to change? There's a lot of hands raised right there. You add one small two-letter word, who wants to change, and that's where people start to back out. And it's important that as you're going through this exercise that you get people in the right mindset, because you can avoid that chaos. You can optimize your maintenance operations. You can make sure things get properly scheduled when you go through this. It's a journey. So I'm a big believer in employing lean manufacturing principles. We'll be covering several of them today. As I said earlier, you need to move away from firefighting mode. If you're in that, I'm primarily doing corrective maintenance work orders all day, that to avoid chaos is you really need to move away from that mode, move away from that mindset. If you're not familiar, SMRP, the Society of Maintenance and Reliability Professionals, which is an awesome organization. If you're not familiar with them, please look them up. They preach an 80-20 ratio to be stable. 80% preventive, 20% reactive or corrective work orders, just to be called, quote unquote, stable. It's been my experience working with customers for many, many years that sounds like a daunting challenge. But if you have the right solution, if you have the right services and you have the right mindset, you can get to those goals. And that's where you really will start to avoid that chaos. 90-10, even better, is considered world class. So that's a goal you really want to start thinking about, because that will really get you on that right path. A wonderful continuous improvement methodology is total productive maintenance. This webinar won't go into super detail on this. We'll talk about it at a very high level. I strongly recommend it if you're not familiar with TPM. It's something you should research. And specifically the autonomous maintenance. You can see there the TPM pillars. There's a whole bunch of pillars related to TPM. Autonomous maintenance is one of those pillars and probably leads itself most closely to how CMMS works. The right-hand side, the 7 steps to TPM, basically with autonomous maintenance is the concept that everybody is responsible for maintenance of your equipment, including the operators, the men and women that spend their whole day near those assets. And if those operators can be involved in this process in a logical, planned, well-trained, well-thought-out manner and catch problems extremely early and notify maintenance extremely early, you're going to avoid those major problems which really contribute to that chaos. So for example, initial cleaning. You've got to get that asset in a state when that person comes to their shift and they look at that asset that it's clean, it's easy to identify problems. And you move up those steps from there. You have to eliminate contamination sources, and you've got to make sure those hard to access areas or hard to clean areas are more readily accessible. And from there, you can start to have those operators perform basic tasks. The TPM, autonomous maintenance methodologies, you really want to let those men and women do basic lubrication, basic cleaning, basic tightening, the things that go into the love and care of an asset that's going to make it be less likely and prone to failure and have those unexpected downtimes, which is a directly leads into that chaos. And then you go from there, inspections, even automate the process with IoT. But if you follow autonomous maintenance methodologies within TPM, it's a wonderful way to get you on the right path. Some examples. If you look at those pictures, that before and after, that's actually the same asset that's just shot from 2 different angles. The left, the before, that asset, when you look at that, how in the world is the operator or anybody going to look at that asset and identify where there's a fluid leak or where there might be some sort of a vibration problem or whatnot? It's dirty, it's filthy. You're not going to be able to see those things. Restore that equipment to a clean and optimal environment. You can see how nice it looks on the right-hand side. It's going to be extremely clear if that operator starts their shift and sees that there's some sort of fluid dripping at a critical area of that asset. Same thing on the right-hand side, the before and after of the orange thing with the plate on the top of it. The chain inside might have been prone, or the gears inside might have been prone to vibration issues or other sort of issues, but we couldn't tell because it was covered. That piece of equipment was retrofitted with a clear Lexan sheet of safety glass so that the operator or anybody can look at that and identify if it even looks like there's a problem. Catch it early. So these are helpful ways to start to get a hold of that. The operator role in autonomous maintenance within TPM: find the problems, inspect, detect, and correct the small defects using preventive, predictive, and operator care techniques. For the assets that have greater needs, number two, you got to return that equipment to optimal conditions. The little picture on the right there with all those little red defect tags, that asset has been evaluated probably by engineering or maintenance or the operator of possible areas where problems have occurred. You need to get that asset to an optimal state so that it's less likely to have problems, or certainly be more easily to identify those problems. And then you want to keep it fixed, number three, so you can sustain and improve the inspections and the repair. And really what you're trying to do is eliminate those ongoing chronic problems with that asset. Avoiding chaos, communication and collaboration are absolutely critical. So often, especially in the older days, and fortunately we're seeing the tide turning on this, but so often in the old days, the maintenance organization, the maintenance department within a company was just treated off in their own silo. They were in their offices, off in the basement, and not communicated well with. We all understand that maintenance can be as a direct contributor to the profitability and the effectiveness of an organization. You need to communicate. You need to collaborate. And if you're not, you need to try to change that within your organization. You should be in direct contact with your production people. And I'm not just talking about when you're having downtime and they're screaming at you to fix something. You should be in contact with engineering. When you identify that the cover of some sort of an asset makes it impossible for you to take an inspection on it and catch those problems earlier, you need to talk to those people about improving that. Safety, compliance, any of those types of people in your organization that you can interact with that can help improve with that communication, that collaboration, that will help avoid that chaos. Solid planning. So whether you're a brand new organization that's opening your factory for the first time, or you've been around forever and you're kind of going into a reset, we want to do better with our maintenance, and you want to really evaluate the planning. And I'm going to work left to right, and I'm going to kind of follow those arrows down the screen there. So in the plan phase, I love the first line there: align reliability strategy with business goals. So business goals often come first. We need to make more products because sales is great. Or maybe we're a little flat, we need to be more efficient. Whatever the business goals are, you need to make sure you are in alignment with what your maintenance organization, your reliability strategy, they have to be in sync with one another. You have to communicate about this. You're going to need access to those assets for PMs. They're going to know that our downtime numbers are getting better. We're having better uptime and so on. Really align with those goals. From there, you start to identify those assets, the physical assets that are contributing to those goals. Prioritize those assets and start to set target goals, target performance requirements, which at the end of the day will turn into key performance indicators and reports and analytics within the CMMS system. Then once you go through that planning phase, you start to move into an assessment and improvement phase. And this is a continuous improvement loop. It may take a while, but you're doing your performance analysis, you're identifying the PMs and the work you need to do, you're tweaking, you're trying to you're going through your TPM autonomous maintenance activities or whatever approach you're going to use to try to make that better, and start to get to the point where you're starting to function better. I mean, you're never fully done. That's why it's called continuous improvement. But you get to that stable point with that asset or that collection of assets or that plant, whatever it may be. And then you're in the control phase. That's where you're just planning work, you're getting it scheduled, you're executing those work orders, preventive, and then addressing your backlog of possible corrective, and you're following up. Eventually, and that should stay in a loop. That should be a sustained maintenance loop until you have reason that you have to change. Maybe all of a sudden are starting to have more downtime. Maybe you're in a season where you're starting to have to do more work, you have less access to those assets for PMs. Whatever it may be, you may have to move back into an assess and improve mode. But you want to get to yourself to the point where you're in that sustained, controlled maintenance loop. Part of a solid plan is to use a maintenance planner or a job planner, or whatever you want to call it. On the right-hand side of that screen, you can see sort of the description of the roles that those persons play. And this needs to be a dedicated position, and it needs to be a qualified person. And not necessarily the person who's just, say, creating work orders. From a more clerical standpoint, I'm of the opinion the person needs to really understand what's going on with maintenance, can have heart-to-heart conversations with them, and understand those challenges. So they're kind of partially a maintenance person, partially an administrative person, certainly are extremely well-organized person. Their goal is to plan that maintenance by the week, the day, all the way down to the hour. So for example, when you go to do your PMs, you know that asset's going to be ready for you. You're going to have a part kit waiting for you. You know those instructions are vetted. You know the technicians or the contractors that are doing that work. It's been completely set up for you. Those job planners have a solid ROI. You're going to have major cost reductions. Your downtime's going down. You're getting closer to that 80-20, 90-10 world-class ratio of preventive to corrective maintenance. The chaos is greatly reduced, but you're going to reduce your mean time to repair. You're going to reduce your downtime. You're going to reduce those profit-killing stockouts when you don't have those parts when you need them. If you're not able to do this, you probably don't have the right person in that maintenance planner role, or you're not using the system, your CMMS system. That's why you should look at Asset Essentials, because these things can all be totally guided. Your maintenance planning activities can be totally guided from your CMMS system. So some of the aspects. Sorry, I had a screen refresh issue, if you just bear with me a second. So some of the aspects of this solid plan. For example, do you have the parts you need? On the screen, you know in Asset Essentials for every PM exactly the parts you're going to need. I mean, if you set that up. And maybe these parts are just being reserved. Maybe you're using a just-in-time ordering process, or you're automatically dispatching those parts. But you know in advance the parts you're going to need for that PM. You're going to know the parts you're low on as well. It's going to be identified on your dashboard. You're going to receive email notifications if you're low on those parts. Do you have the right staff or contractor to do the job? Whether you're assigning a crew, an individual technician, a manager who will reassign it, an outside contractor, your preventive maintenance routines, you should identify who is going to do that work, or what group of people are going to do that work. So you're not guessing at it at the last second. Have that planned in advance. Be ready for quote-unquote pit stop maintenance. So we've all had the situation where we have unexpected downtime and maintenance is screaming at you. Production is screaming at you to get it fixed because it's really hurting, and you got to get it fixed. We've all been there. The really forward-thinking, smart maintenance professional will not only jump on that downtime and get the problem that's been identified fixed, but why not take a look at the other possible PMs that you could knock off while that asset is available to you? You may have had to ask for that asset to do that maintenance a week later, or maybe you're already late getting to some PMs because you didn't have access to it. And I'm not suggesting that you prolong the downtime. I'm suggesting like pit stop maintenance, like a NASCAR event. You got the crew working the problem, but hey, change that filter. Lubricate while you have access to the inside of that asset at the same time. Pit stop maintenance, it really helps you avoid quote-unquote double downtime when you would have needed to ask for that asset at a future time. And in the case of Asset Essentials, it's very simple. When you know you're down and you've got your crew allocated to work on that downtime, just simply find that asset in the system and see the list of future or possibly backlogged preventive maintenance that you can attack at the very same time. Make sure you're defining and setting your estimated hours. You can't improve what you don't measure. So like, how long are these PMs going to take you? And over time, you're going to get a good feel for that as people do it more and more. And when you know how long these things are going to take, and you set that in the system, when you can set it down to the person, the overall for the job, even if the times have to offset one another because they're done in steps or phases, Get that information in the system so that when you're going to do the PM, you know exactly how it's going to take, but it helps you to coordinate other preventive and possibly corrective maintenance to work around that at the same time. Make sure you've got excellent, solid instructions. And we're talking checklists, pictures, videos, access to any documentation you might need to have. You can see on the screen there, you can have as verbose or as simple step-by-step instructions for performing a PM. In this aging workforce, while your veteran maintenance people are starting to retire, you really need to capture that information for that next generation of maintenance people on your team. Get that captured. Make sure, film that person performing that task and make it available to that younger technician that's going to be doing that work moving forward. If you have job safety assessments, lockout tagout procedures, safety programs, associate them to your preventive maintenance. Associate them to your work orders. You want a safe work environment, for sure. It really helps to coordinate that because CMMS, your maintenance staff, they need that information. It can be right at your fingertips. You can be looking at a work order, you can be looking at a preventive maintenance or corrective maintenance work order, and one click, pull up, what is my job safety assessment? What are some safety PP&E policies that I might have to follow to do it? And even sign off that you read these things. Use the job planner tool. So the job planner tool in Asset Essentials, the top half of that screen there where you see a list of all the my team, and you see some of those names are in green and some of them are in orange and some of them are in red. Basically, it's a snapshot to show you who is over or underutilized on your team. The bottom half of the screen shows the workload for one of those technicians. And you have the ability to move work orders around, swap one staff member out for another, lengthen or shorten them, or remove them altogether if they're not needed. But you kind of, quote-unquote, whittle so that what you're really shooting to do is to make sure that top half of that screen, that none of your maintenance team is in the red. So everybody is as optimized as they can. I mean, all these things are going to lead to less chaos and scheduling if you're really properly planned. Make sure your work is really smartly prioritized. An example that I always use, work order gets created because the restroom near the staff break room is broken. And somebody writes that up as a high priority work order. Well, we obviously need that restroom to be fixed, but there's 3 other restrooms not very far from that one. You get a work order on a production asset that's really important to your operations, and that's called high priority. Well, clearly that's going to outrank that. What we do is we do a combination of the priority of the work order combined with the criticality of the asset. So when you kind of look in that screen there, it's maybe the 4th or 5th column over. You got priority, asset criticality, and then calculated criticality. And that's a calculated number that takes into account the priority of the work order and the criticality of the asset. And so you see in the priority column, we have medium priority work orders outranking high priority work orders based on that calculated criticality. Why? Because those assets are more important to our operations. So you want to, when you're working your work orders, both preventive and corrective, you really should be focused on the more important ones first and the lesser important ones second. And knowing the assets that are more critical to your operations, this can really help. Bill of materials for your assets. Know for your assets exactly the parts that were going to be used for that asset. So you can just-in-time ordering process, reservation of parts, helping you in the part purchasing process. So the relationship between the asset and the parts, which then will extend to your preventive and your corrective maintenance work orders. So let's talk a bit about IIoT, the Industrial Internet of Things, and how that can benefit or optimize your preventive maintenance. So IoT, the concept of IoT, and the little screen there, the little picture on the bottom there, all of your pieces of equipment, all of your assets, your facility has the capability, either out of the box or with retrofit, to deliver metrics, to deliver data, meters, PLC data, whatever you want to call it, but basically those assets are telling you when they're not doing well, and they can broadcast this information electronically and real time. It's real time tracking of your asset health. If you have an asset that is having an issue, it can alert you. And what ends up happening is it'll automatically create a work order for you in the system. And then that'll kick off a series of emails to appropriate people and just become part of the overall workflow for work orders. This is really going to help you move towards that 80-20 preventive corrective maintenance ratio, which again will absolutely lead to less scheduling chaos. So the next screen here is called Pushing Up the PF Curve. And I know this is a bit of an eye chart. So I'd like you to focus from left to right. And we're going to follow that line, that line that's a curve. It moves left to right and curves from that letter D all the way down to the bottom right-hand side. So when you have an asset, that asset, when you get it from the factory you bought it from, and it's now installed, from the D to the I, when you get that asset installed, that's the best that asset's ever going to run. It's as optimal as it's going to be. Over time, as you move from the I to the P there, over time you're going to hit P. That's the potential point of failure. It's very early. This asset is still running magnificently. But it's now starting to curve down a little bit. It's very, very hard to detect early on, but you're going to start to see some degradation in the performance of that asset. Over time, as that curve, we're going to start going down that curve from the P down to the F. The F down that curve is the functional failure. That is the point in time when that asset is no longer able to perform at an acceptable level. It's not doing what you need it to do. And at that point, you're producing maybe inferior quality products. It's much more susceptible to possible downtime. It's just not running as well as it did. So that between the P and the F, the PF interval, we want to try to catch those problems in between that point. If you keep going down that curve all the way at the bottom, you see catastrophic failure. That is downtime. That is profit killing, and we want to avoid that. So the goal of maintenance departments is to, quote unquote, push up the PF curve. And you do that by good maintenance, good scheduled maintenance. As you go up and move away from the firefighting, downtime, catastrophic failure, if you start to do basic preventive maintenance, you're going to start to push up that curve. Calendar-based maintenance inspections, start to make visual inspections, listen for problems. As you're going to go up and up that curve, you start to get into more predictive maintenance, condition-based monitoring, and that's where your IoT initiatives can really help. And that's where you're really going to start to catch those problems earlier. So pushing up the PF curve is all about embracing a solid preventive maintenance plan, employing things like just really good scheduling of preventive maintenance, moving towards meter reading, usage-based, predictive, IoT-oriented, into CBM, condition-based monitoring. But you really want to try to catch those problems as early as you can. Metrics, analytics, measuring. If you can't measure something, you likely can't fix it. You're having too much downtime. We know we're having downtime because management's screaming at us. We have production screaming at us. But do we know why we're having downtime? Where is it coming from? You got to define goals and objectives. Where are your pain points? Downtime example I just used. Safety work orders. You failed an ISO compliance, or you have one up and coming and you want to make sure you don't fail it. You want to define those. Once you define those goals, you can start to think about what are the metrics I'm going to need to track to make sure I am in compliance with those goals. Create a solid plan about how you're going to meet up against those goals. Make sure you have dedicated, consistent, quality data entry. I've seen clients that have put work orders in the system, fixed broken equipment. There's no mention at all what the problem code, the cause code, how long of downtime it was, who did the work, what parts did you use, how long did it take to fix it. In those work order screens, and certainly in Asset Essentials, you have the ability to track that stuff very easily. That data entry that people might look at, oh, I don't have time to do that. You need that information because that's where your quality metrics and analytics come from. And again, if you can't measure this, you're not going to be able to fix this. Those analytics follow to support the progress. When that happens, your chaos will slip away. In Asset Essentials, we have all kinds of reports to help you with this that align with your goals. These are very generic examples. But for example, what is the ratio of my corrective and preventive maintenance? That little odometer there looking screen on the left there, we targeting an 80%. That's where I'm in the green. I'm only at 60 right now. Well, at least I know where I'm at. You set the goals, and you may not set 80 as the goal right off the bat. You may be at 25%, and then maybe later when you achieve that, you move it to 50, and then 80, and then hopefully to 90%. But you set those goals, and you put those KPI dashboard items right there where you can see, your team can see. You can measure, are you finishing your work orders on time? Are they late? By person, by priority. You have the ability to look at other metrics such as, basically a breakdown of all of your work orders. Who's doing the work? How long is it taking? What are the costs involved with all of this? Where is my downtime coming from? That's a big one, is identifying where your downtime is coming from. My mean time to repair analysis. How long is it taking me to fix this? By asset, by person, and so forth. Bottom line is you need to find those metrics and analytics that you have that are going to help reinforce, are you making progress? And as you make progress, that's where that chaos, that scheduled maintenance chaos or maintenance chaos in general will start to slip away as you start to see improvements in those metrics that you are tracking. Again, when you're looking at your metrics and analytics, if you can't measure it, you're not likely going to be able to fix it. Are you hitting your preventive maintenance plan? Are you reducing or at least maintaining a proper backlog of work orders? Reviewing that progress, and if you're not making that progress, you have to start to look back at those continuous improvement initiatives we talked about earlier in the webinar. You may have to go back and analyze, well, why are we having those problems? You can also have these reports and data ready for coordination with your other departments, management, production, safety, engineering, whoever you are now hopefully collaborating and communicating with. Who are your better performers? Your technicians that are doing a great job. Maybe have your newer, maybe struggling a little bit technicians, shadow them to see where those improvements are. You know who your better performers are probably just by natural reaction, but when you start to see that data of how they're doing from your CMMS system, that can really help identify that for you. So in recap or conclusion here, have a solid plan. At Dude Solutions, we employ a model we call APPM, which is an acronym that stands for Assess, Prioritize, Plan, Execute, and Maintain. We're not just about software here, we're about the services that you need to properly implement your software. So basically, when you're going to make a plan, you're going to assess your current situation. We work with you to do that. You're going to prioritize where your goals and objectives need to be. And then we work with you to make sure that the software is implemented where that plan is included in that. You start to execute that plan. You will start to see progress as you start to get into that closed loop, that maintenance where things are starting to do well. And when you're done with that, this is a continuous improvement process. You can always make it better. And it's a circle. You just keep going round and round. Again, I cannot emphasize strongly enough, are you communicating and collaborating with your brother and sister departments? You should not be a maintenance-only silo. Communicate with these other aspects of your organization. Consider the industrial Internet of Things. Consider harnessing that data. If you're not ready for it yet, think about it for the future. And then metrics and analytics. You can't fix what you can't measure. Make sure you've got a good handle on that. So I'm at the conclusion of my part. I think I'm turning it over to Greg at this point.
Thanks, Paul, for that informative presentation. We now have time for a few questions. And in addition, there should be a poll question where you can ask for more information on specific aspects of the presentation today. If you don't see the question box, just scroll down a little bit. It should be under the video. Our first question, we have a viewer who's wanted a CMMS system for years, but they say they can't get their boss to get past the costs. What advice would you have for people in that position?
That's a good question. I've been hearing that question my whole career. And the first thing that I coach people on about this is to move away from a cost conversation and move towards a value conversation or a return on investment. I mean, for example, if you look at the math of what your downtime is costing you, it dwarfs the cost of implementing a CMMS so you can change your uptime from, say, 89% to 94%. That jump of 5% in uptime will typically, can have a massive value or ROI over what the cost would be to implement the software. Failing an ISO audit or any of those safety-related issues that you might have. If you turn that conversation around of not just what it costs, but what it can deliver in terms of value to your organization, that can be extremely helpful in having those conversations with your management.
Another one here. Several members of this person's team are older and have been resistant to software in the past. They want the analysis, but how do they get their team to embrace tools like this?
Another excellent question, and it used to be extremely hard in the earlier days to have sort of the old school maintenance people use a mobile device or even a PC to put information in a work order. The number one strategy I found to be effective is to make sure you consider the opinions and the advice of these veteran maintenance people. There's an amazing amount of experience they have. The worst thing you can do is cram technology unsuspectingly on anybody, and especially a veteran maintenance team. So involve them in the conversations about why we need maintenance technology and get their opinions. Let them, say, watch a demo of Asset Essentials. Let them ask questions and hear about how we have coached other people through that process. But again, I think including them as opposed to just telling them, hey, we're getting a maintenance system, show up for training next week. That's the worst thing you can do. Include them in the process.
See a few questions along these lines. This person says part of their problem is the parts storeroom is a mess. Is a lot of work to enter all of those parts, and will this help their staff organize that area better?
Yeah, whether it's your the example I showed earlier on the webinar where you saw that asset that was totally dirty and you wouldn't be able to identify if there was a fluid leak or anything till you cleaned it. Same thing with your spare parts room. If your spare parts room is a mess, you're going to have to go through an exercise to get it organized. And that's not just software. That's just discipline and finding the time to do it. However, when all your parts are in the system and you can use a barcode scanner to find that part and know where exactly they are, you can print out barcode labels like you can do with Asset Essentials and help logically organize how those parts are going to work. We have a quick checkout option of parts when you come in there into the spare part room. We can be a part of that solution from a software side to help manage that. But that's going to be a group effort. But at the end of the day, you got to get that room organized as best you can, and then start to rely on the benefits that the software is going to give you to help make that go smoother.
Sure, understandable. Well, thank you everybody for your time today. Paul, thank you for the presentation. And thank you to Dude Solutions for making this possible. We'll be emailing an archived version of the webinar in the next few days, so keep an eye out on that. And if you have any questions, pass them along, and we'll do our best to get those answered. Thank you for your time today, Paul.
Thank you, Greg. Everybody have a great day.